I just like legit feel like a different person since the last time I saw you.
Right. Well, we all, yeah, that's a crazy amount of time. 10 to 15 years, like that's wild.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote it down because I was trying to understand how to talk to you and what we could talk about. But I was like, I think how it is that we formatively spent our 20s together and
Mhm.
then disappeared for all of our 30s.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's
I
facts.
I turned 40 a month ago. Or
Wow, happy
2 weeks.
birthday. Right.
How old
Happy
are you?
birthday. I'm 42.
42. Okay, so
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I'm well past, well over
Score.
that.
Score. It was traumatic. Yeah, it's okay.
What did you do for your
Um,
birthday? My name is Stefano Prishko, and Vanessa and I met in university. We were not in a class together. It was in 2004, pretty sure. No,
yeah.
2005. 2005. It was the winter of 2005, I believe. And Vanessa was in a class with my roommate, Luca Patrician, and they became friends. And then worlds collided, and we started hanging out subsequent to that. You don't think that's true? That's not how you remember it?
It wasn't Luca, it was Dree.
I don't think so. Dree wasn't even in school.
It was a philosophy class.
Dree wasn't in school yet, though.
So I met Luca?
I'm pretty sure you and Luca were in a class together.
Okay, it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I was ready to be like, there's no fucking
Because Dree didn't
Okay,
start. So, like, I moved to Montreal. Should I restart?
yeah, go. Say, where are you from? Who are you? Yeah.
So we met in Montreal, and I moved to Montreal in the summer of 2004. Started university along with my roommate at the time and friend Luca. We both started in the fall of 2004. And I remember meeting you in the. I definitely have a very clear. I don't know how like intimate detail you
You could
want me to
go.
go
You could go.
into. So I have my very specific memory of meeting you. I think I actually did meet you before this, but very specifically, I remember in the that winter, me and Luca and Dree and Adrian had a band together,
Yeah.
and we played a show. And after that show, you came over to our house with Luca.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Okay.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I had met you
Yeah.
before
Okay.
that. But I
Yeah.
know you were in Luca's class. Like
Hmm.
he definitely introduced us to you.
Okay.
Because Dree didn't start school till at least a year later. I think maybe even 2 years later. So they couldn't have been in school with you,
Oh
and
yeah.
they didn't really bring any friends. Dree was like very insular at that point. They're
Yeah.
like a superstar or like socialite now, but
Yeah. I
very different
heard.
time. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they're really a go-getter in a lot of ways. They love chatting to people. At one point, they
And
actually
they love
said
karaoke.
they love karaoke, obsessed with
I
karaoke.
heard. Yeah.
They actually said at one point, it's like, it would be okay if I lost all my friends. I would make new ones in a day.
That also
Like
doesn't
that's
surprise me though.
so rude, also though.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so that's how I remember me. That's my recollection of meeting you. I guess it sounds like you have a slightly different memory of it, but I have a pretty specific memory of that night in particular. I think I had met you before, but there was some
Yeah.
goings on
True.
between you
Yeah.
and Luke at
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
point, and I remember you coming to the house.
Yeah. That was the early. I mean, yes, absolutely. Okay. So are you okay if I ask you questions and we just flow?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Do you
Is-
know, did you look at my newsletter? Do you have any concept of
I,
where
I
this?
kind of breezed through a few of the
Okay.
clips, but I didn't want to spoil
Okay.
it. I didn't
Okay.
actually like
Okay.
watch anything. But it's a cool project. It's cool to connect with people. I think that's really interesting. I was doing. We can get into this maybe later, but I was doing
Yeah.
radio programs, and one idea I had was kind of similar for the radio. It's like everyone's always interviewing like quote unquote interesting people, people who are like important or whatever. But it's like you can have an interesting conversation with anybody if you just give them the chance. So that's what I thought of as a good radio program idea is just like having people talk about themselves that don't get to talk about themselves. So this is not so dissimilar from what you're doing, except they're people that you already know, I guess, for the most part, it seems like, or getting to know kind of thing.
Sort of. Sort of. Um, Started as like I'll just ask friends who I think are I like or
Yeah.
something, but or they're my friends,
I
I
guess I
guess.
guess I kind of like them.
Um, but I think I've done like 12 in total.
Yeah, right.
And Um, I would say 50% of them are people that I met at a party and I was like, hey, you
Let's
are
chat.
great. Let's chat. But I I mean, I guess not surprising, but that's 100% what this project is. Like what you said. Like it came fully from reckoning with like my own relationship to status
Mhm.
and to like my ego
Right.
and to wanting to just do whatever I wanted and
Hmm.
realizing that like I don't want to ask anyone for money. So it was like, oh, what can I do that I care deeply about and is also like aligned with who I am in the world?
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, I live just to value my friends.
Nice. I love that.
That's the most important thing to me in the world. Like if you
Yeah.
boil me down, it's just like I love my friends.
Yeah.
That's why I'm alive. Um, and I don't think that like popular media, like it's basically celebrities or experts.
Right.
And celebrities and experts are great. Love them. But like they're
What about
just,
everybody else?
yeah, but what about everybody else? And I think feeling bad about myself for like a long time in a lot of different ways and comparing myself to other people, it's kind of been a reckoning. Like it took me 40 years, but to just be like, oh, like I'm valuable.
Yeah.
I'm great. Like there's no, and I've met enough people who were like experts and celebrities, and I was like, you're nothing. But it's like you're
Uh-huh.
not nothing, but you're just a person too.
Totally.
So like like there's just something a little fucked about our
Hmm.
culture. Um, and so like
Especially, I think, like equating celebrity with expertise too. It's like if somebody's famous, that means that they're a genius. Like classic, maybe we don't want to talk about things like this, but like Elon Musk, it's like he's like a
100%.
rich man. So it's like, oh, he must be a genius also. It's like, no, he's a fucking idiot. He just got rich by exploiting the system. So he's good at one thing, getting rich, but doesn't mean he knows how to do everything else. And so many Hollywood celebrities or music celebrities, like, oh yeah, they're an expert on anything they talk about, of course, because they're famous and beautiful. But it's like, no, they don't actually know anything.
Yeah.
We're just projecting that onto them. We want to believe them. We want to listen to them because they look hot.
Yeah. I mean, we love hot. I
Yeah,
still
hot's
love
good. Hot's good.
hot.
Yeah, that's good. I like
I
to
s-
watch them speak too. Like I watch
yeah.
the interview shows. Like I'm not against it,
Yeah.
but other people should get a chance too. Us less hot people should be able to
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah. And I mean, I think just my learning has been like, celebrities and experts in a similar way. It's just like they become, I'm not going to say this in a smart fashion, but once you're like a commodity, like once you are a valuable commodity, then you're valued as a person and your words mean something. And that's
Yeah,
insane. That's
totally.
that's completely insane.
Yeah.
And I think like deep down, a major reason why we are here, like in the world. And I think I think, and we'll cut this out because this is my cheeseballness, but like the, I think if people valued themselves more and like could hold on to their power more, like if everyone understood, because I have asked I have so many. I mean, I've asked to interview friends and people seem very confused. Like they're just like, but why? Like I have nothing to say. And I'm
Hmm.
like, but have you made choices in your life? Done.
Right. And I totally even what you're saying, like obviously I agreed to do this and we're talking about it and I'm talking about how like I had a similar idea and value people, but at the same time, totally, I'm like, am I gonna I'm totally nervous about like talking about myself. I hate talking about myself. What am I going to contribute? It's really hard to value yourself when you're not getting that external
Yeah.
validation. And even if you are, a lot of celebrities I hear, I don't know any
Yeah.
celebrities, but they talk about how they're a lot of them are insecure. A lot of them don't feel like they're actually worth anything. And even in those interview scenarios, they're kind of acting in that same space. So all of us are scared and sad and, and don't
Yeah.
value ourselves, but we should. Not,
Yeah.
I'm definitely the worst for that. I don't see myself positively a lot of times, generally. But anyways, yeah, good. We're
Love
talking.
that.
We're
Okay,
doing
we're
it.
gonna
We're
we're gonna
doing
get
that.
into that. But here's my solution to it. What if I'm an idiot?
Right. Mm.
What's the big deal? Like that's it's like okay, so I've got to come off as smart or like what are my expertise or maybe even just like how I speak. Like in my academic times, I was always so nervous about how I articulated in class and just in and I really enjoy embracing being incoherent. What
Mm.
if I'm incoherent sometimes? That's cool. There's a lot of people who sound coherent who are absolute fucking idiots. Like,
Mm.
that's not, I don't know. Like, what if you think I'm stupid? That's
Right.
great. Who cares? Like, I think it's just like I guess
It's
I'm just,
really hard to get there, though.
oh, it is.
I
I'm
agree
just,
with your sentiment, but boy, oh
yeah.
boy, I can't do that.
But like, I've been rejected so much.
Yeah.
I think it's like a long, once you once enough people, I suppose, think you're stupid or say no or don't validate you, you have a choice whether to like agree with them or not.
Hmm.
And maybe I'm delusional. There's that part of it. But it's like, do you know what I mean? It's just at a
Right.
certain point.
I think that's great. Like that's totally great. It's really, I find it really hard. Like failure and embarrassment and rejection, all that stuff, really tough to the point where it's like, yeah, I often don't like try things because I really hate not being good at something or feeling like I can't do something or feeling like I'm embarrassing myself or embarrassing the people that I'm working with, whatever. So that's definitely a big challenge that I've not overcome. But this is really, you have a very healthy attitude towards it. Very nice, very inspiring. But it's very hard for me to get there.
I I have in the best possible way just kind of like a blur of music of concerts, whether they
Hmm.
were like you or us or somebody,
Yeah.
40s,
Yeah. Big part. Yeah.
alleyways,
Very important part of our Montreal experience.
various forms of like eating, like
Hmm.
some form of like eating, whether whatever, like, but like also cooking, like
Hmm.
enjoying eating, drinking, partying, music.
Yeah.
With like an ode to dressing up and
Hmm.
costuming, where
Yeah.
you would be concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That was definitely my shtick. Sounds pretty
and
nice, doesn't it? Very
yeah,
good job.
I wrote it. This is maybe like a fun way in because it's how I remember you and all of our years together, which is actually a lot of years.
Hmm.
Um, I think I think it feels sad to say the best time of my life,
Hmm.
but if best by meaning like the purest form of like joy
Hmm.
and like truly just valuing not like I mean we did party a lot like I drank a lot but it was like as someone who best friends forever club it just doesn't get better than hanging out with people you love as often as you can
Hmm.
and playing music and seeing music and like
Yeah.
it was beautiful. It's like the most beautiful. I'm so happy for those
Yeah.
years.
Totally. It's like unimpeachable. It was just so like you say, it was so pure in that sense. Like best, like how do you want to categorize your life? Like it's not,
Yeah.
maybe not a good way to look at your life is like good times versus not so good times,
Yeah.
or like you'll never get back to the salad days of your 20s, whatever. But yeah, there was just it was really clear what we all wanted to do, and that was like have laughs with our friends in whatever that manifested in. Was it like organizing a fancy drinks party? Was it like playing in a band? Was it going to a show? Was it sitting by the canal? Whatever it was, Olympics, whatever
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
doing, it was just like this is. We know that the only thing that we want to do is like spend time with this great group of people that we get along with like super legitimately well. Like it was just
Yeah.
like everybody is just vibing like so hard, and we all just had like friend crushes on everybody else, and we're like
Yeah.
this like we don't. There's no like confusion about like oh what else, what do I am I really in this? We were really present. I feel like we were often
So
just really
present.
like present in those interactions because we were like not distracted by other stuff. We are like, no, this is like what could be better than this. It's like you can't you can't fuck with this. It's so good.
And we like it's weird because so much of life has happened
Mhm.
that's not ever really going back to that like way of living, but we organized so much creative stuff. You organized so much creative stuff that was how do I say this? Like productive, but for a reason no other than
Yeah,
just doing it and
right.
like being with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. That's something that I've struggled with subsequently is like having like I really like to be like busy and creative in certain ways, but I struggle with doing it if there's not like a specific goal and having the goal of just like fun times getting drunk, like that seemed really clear, but now that doesn't it's not that it doesn't appeal to me, but it just doesn't seem as like legitimate of a goal. So I'm not doing as many of those like creative organizational things, not creating costumes in the same way. Like having like an outlet that didn't really it wasn't like a goal that would amount to anything, and it definitely certainly didn't, other than like positive experiences. Um, so it's I don't know, it's interesting to have had that focus and to do stuff to get to that goal, but that goal like who would call that like a worthwhile goal? Definitely not like parents or anything, but whatever.
But it's weird, and I don't have any answers. I would like to know what you think of this. But in that bubble time period of, I guess, my entire 20s, I thought that everyone was like that. Even when I came to New York, I assumed that everyone in their 20s did exactly what we did.
Mhm.
Maybe some people partied less, whatever, like no judgment on your sobriety, but I just thought everyone was doing that. And especially when I moved to New York, I don't know if this is a harsh reality, but one of the initial realities was, oh yeah, a lot of other people have spent their 20s doing exactly the opposite, which was doing productive things for very, very specific
Mhm.
pipeline,
Yeah.
laid out reasons, like box checking and like ladder climbing and all of these things. And that's something that I still think about. And like, I don't regret any of my choices, like whatsoever. It's made me who I am. I would be like a totally different person. But yeah, I don't know. Was there ever a moment where that hit you?
Oh yeah. Definitely in the last so like yeah, just like what you're saying, we had a very specific focus and goal in our 20s, and it was not corporate or family building, like none of those
Uh,
things, like
Nor
no,
was it like art, career, box
totally,
ticking
totally, it was just like good
strategy.
times.
Hmm.
Yeah, Adriel actually once asked me like what I want to do with my like life, and I was just like I don't actually remember me saying this, but he brought it up a few years ago, and he's just like have good times with my friends. That's what I told him was like my life goal at that point. And it's like that's what we were doing. That's obviously what I didn't obviously I consciously formulated at a certain point, but I wasn't thinking about it too much. But then in the last few years, for sure, as I'm like now in my 40s, I did have done various things. And at one point, I was working in radio and working at CBC, and I did like an internship, and then I got a job at CBC, and I was working with a lot of people who were my age or younger or older, whatever. Like there was a mix of people. A lot of them were younger though, but were much more like established and had like concrete job experiences and experience in that like corporate field or whatever in journalism and all that stuff. And I really felt like, oh, like did I make like how could I ever get to the level of these people? I have not like put in the 15 years that they've done, even though they're 5, 10 years younger than me. They've been focused on this to achieve this goal, and I haven't. And it felt very much like yeah, impostery and like, did I make the wrong choices? Now I don't have like a career. I'm like a 42-year-old person. I don't have a specific career that I've achieved a lot of like um financial security from and all that stuff. So it's like definitely that's been a thought, but at the same time, even in that position, having conversations with those people, that often they were like some topic would come up and I would have some like bizarre story of like this party that we threw, these costumes that we made, this time I like hitchhiked across this place or went to this country or whatever. And they're like, what the fuck? Like we didn't do any of that
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like you say, I kind of thought that people in their 20s just like sowed their oats in that way, but it's very obvious subsequently in my 30s and now 40s, like a lot of people I've interacted with did not. And a lot of people, especially coming to a city like Edmonton, a lot of the people that stayed here, like I have a lot of a friend group here, and a lot of them did have fun, and I would come back and we would participate in similar things. It wasn't so different from my Montreal experience, but it was more like homebody in a lot of ways. And then a lot of the people that I didn't stay in touch with, but I went to school, like high school or whatever with, they did just choose a career and go with it, have a family in their 20s or whatever. It's a very different lifestyle,
Yeah.
different choices.
Yeah. It's very, it's interesting the word you used before to describe our time of like being super present with each other.
Mm.
And I, and just like we were living very strongly with each other. We were very present in our lives. And this is the first time I've ever realized this, but I think, and so this isn't fully true. Like, um imposter syndrome wise and like the ch those years, my 20s, I never questioned the choices I was making
Mm.
or the stuff we were doing together. I never thought like what you're doing is wrong or like you should. It was like, so I have a bit of a spirituality at this point in my life that I didn't have then. And
Sure.
that's definitely because of all the rejection and pain. So I found, some sort of spiritual practice because of that. But like in some ways, like looking back, I kind of see it as those, like our time, our whatever, 20s, youth, I don't know what time period that is, was so free. Like we followed our heart, and that sounds so cheesy, but there was like a real creative freedom to that. And like that is such a different feeling from the creative career choices and academic choices that I've made after that, which is interesting because I didn't call myself an artist in that time period.
Mm. But when you that was maybe when you're being your most artistic or whatever, being the most expressive, at least.
Or like I felt the most free.
Mm.
There was like
Right.
the least amount of pressures.
Hmm. Totally.
Um,
I totally agree that it felt, yeah, we weren't judging each other and we weren't judging ourselves nearly as much as we would go on to do.
yeah, yeah,
At least I wasn't. I don't
yeah,
know. I like it's hard to speak for everyone who was participating in our parties,
yeah,
but
that's true.
um, and it wasn't. I wouldn't say that. Like I've definitely always been somebody that is a bit like self-critical and a bit like yeah, hard on myself. And I there was some level that at least in the band side of it, playing music
Yeah,
in at that point with Swamp Sex Robots, I did I didn't really know how to get more popular or whatever. And it wasn't really like I wanted to be world famous. But we played like so many shows and we really liked when people came to the shows and we wanted that to grow a little bit and have like a bit of success in that field. And I did feel kind of bad about not being able to achieve that and I didn't know how to do it.
yeah,
It wasn't to say that like I didn't put everything that I had into what I was doing and didn't have like so many good times. But there was even then there was like some seeds of self doubt and some disappointments of like not being able to achieve a bit more with something that I was putting a lot of effort into. But it definitely like yeah into the 30s and now 40s it feels even more like not seeing like some sort of concrete accomplishment, some sort of like recognition or some sort of like compensation, like not just monetary, but some sort of like return on investment of effort
hmm,
and choices and stuff like that. It gets harder. It feels harder now than it did then for sure.
yeah. Yeah, I feel you. And I think the not just the judgment, not just to not have the judgment of ourselves and each other, but maybe to what you're saying, as someone who's building a film career and also doing performance and all kinds of shit, continue to do that now. I think we were also, or I was also very ignorant of how cultural systems operated, like
Yeah.
professionally and like markets, like whether that's the music market or the film industry or
Hmm.
academia, even like all of the like the professionalization of all of the crafts we were doing.
Hmm.
Um, we didn't have the pressures of like, well, this is what I should be doing to like become the next Canadian, like whatever, or to, be Adam McGoyan or whatever. Like I didn't put those pressures on myself. And I think some of the fun was also in like ignoring those realities.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
and the consequences of that has been my 30s, like good and bad.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, I don't know. I think that's interesting the way you put it. It's like kind of positive consequences too. It's like you got to have experiences that you could potentially then draw on later
totally.
on, rather than your only experiences are like banging your head against the wall of like corporate growth or becoming an art star or whatever it is. Like if your whole experience is just like networking, then that's like what do you have to talk about the people that you're trying to network with, if that's your goal or whatever. But it's like if you have this well of like positive, interesting, weird, like what am I trying to say? Consequence free experience, then that's I think that's a thing that you've gained, but it is hard to commodify. And unfortunately that we just like live in this capitalist hellscape that we everything has to be commodified. So
Yeah. I mean, it's a really like I think the answers, like the judgments on our conversation will just say a lot about the person who's judging, Like it's like I um I'm definitely like my judgment on this situation, which is not like a right or wrong thing, but how I make peace with like where I am in my life is to just kind of be grateful for that time and to
yeah.
realize that like that's also just like who I am. Like I'm very happy that I got to figure out who I am, that it was like a value that we had, even like maybe without knowing it. We just were like very interested in being ourselves. Like I got to be myself. Like that's unfortunately a huge deal, like
Mm-hmm.
or a huge privilege. And that then made me like take a lot longer and learn a lot of really hard lessons for a long time, still learning them, and I don't have any money and I don't have financial security. And also we're not rich people, we're like middle class Canadians. Um, and then you realize that like, it's really hard to be an artist if you're not a rich person. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't make certain choices early on. But it's like all the way to what we were saying at the beginning, it's like I think I've like forgiven myself. I'm allowing myself to take a long time. I think that's the thing, is that it's the tragedy in life for me is giving up. And it's
Mm-hmm.
very easy to give up or give up. It's very easy to say like it's too late to see the like what you were saying, to see the it come together. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really like an adjustment of timelines and just like an adjustment of like what the story is supposed to look like. And I feel so cheesy when these words are coming out of my mouth, but it's like it's true because and that's why I'm doing this thing, is because I am like so fascinated. Like when you talk to anyone and you hear about the choices that they've made,
Mm-hmm.
most people like. the celebrities and the experts, sure, they are doing exactly what we didn't do, right? That's like kind of how it works.
Hmm.
But whatever. Like that's
Yeah.
not a person. And like how boring to have a world filled with people who do that. That just doesn't make any sense. Like so I think part of this project is like for me to say like it's okay.
Hmm.
And then I like find all the other people and then I say like it's okay. Like, you
Nice. We
know,
need that. We need that.
right? I don't know. Does that like does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah. And like I was talking about before with the CBC kind of like career that I was like on a little bit, it was especially when I was living in Toronto working there and there was like different jobs came up to as permanent positions and all these things. And I was working at for most of the time I was there, I was working in just as like what's called a casual in CBC, and they just like call you and you pick up shifts or whatever. And I that actually really suited me. I was just like I don't have to book holidays. I can take time off whenever I want. If I'm like in a band, which I was at the time, I could I could leave on tour, whatever it was. Like there was no like commitment. You didn't get some of the security, you didn't get benefits, whatever. But it's like I don't have a lot of like financial needs. I'm like very happy to not have a ton of money or and I don't have any health problems, thankfully. So it's like I didn't need a lot of this the security of like a permanent position, whatever. And it was more of a headache really to have these permanent positions. But being in that like semi-corporate environment, I felt like the push to be like, oh, I should be, I'm a failure if I don't have this recognition from the company by them giving me this permanent position or whatever. And it was really a reckoning to be like, why like society's telling me that I should do something, but it's like it doesn't actually fit with what I enjoy or what's going to make me happy or what I want out of my life. It was a real struggle to balance that. It's like and figure out what I actually did want, and it did not involve that. It didn't involve having a permanent position um, in like a corporate structure like that that I would be kind of locked into doing the same thing every day. Like that. That's one of the to me the one of the scariest things is like doing the same thing, going to the same place at the same time and doing the same thing every day. Wow, that's like really scary for some reason to me. It's just like I really crave like a lot of different inputs and most most careers, most jobs, like you can't really have that. It has to be the same thing all the time. You have to commit to being there all the time and not having time off, having a week off a year or something like that, 2 weeks. Like, my God, a
Yeah.
friend of mine here, it's like she's worked for in the same kind of field for like, yeah, since she was 20 years old. And it's like she still only gets 2 weeks off a year. It's like, what? You need vacation. You need to go
Yeah.
be able to go do something. So
Yeah. I mean, I think about it a lot, and then I think, people are different. So I
yeah,
like,
totally.
people are made differently. They have different needs, different.
Yeah, not to judge somebody who
Yeah.
enjoys that and can thrive in that type of scenario. And I actually do like a lot of structure in my life in certain ways, but just like that long term like tunnel of this is where you live for some reason freaks me out.
Yeah.
It was a struggle to like get to kind of recognize, and I wouldn't say I'm all the way there, that I'm like satisfied and understand what I want and how I'm going to get it, but to recognize at least partially that it's like there are different options, and if you're not focused, if you don't see yourself as needing like a ton of money for whatever reason, if you're not focused on just being rich, you don't necessarily have to like slave away in something horrible. Like there's different alternatives that could potentially be there, and it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily involve like working always or working in a cubicle or whatever. So
Yeah. I mean, part of what you're saying, so I didn't really know the word values until like several years ago. And if someone would have asked me, like, what are your values? I'd have been like, fuck you, like, was fucking bullshit. But it is something that is very real and very helpful in terms of thinking about like not judging other people and not judging myself. I'm like, oh, you just fucking value like such different things. And money is a very interesting thing to think about, which I have a lot of problems with. Um, and I guess I have a lot of complicated issues around money, so it's not that easy for me to talk about. But I think that like I don't value it.
Mm,
I think that I don't like the idea of doing something for money. And obviously, I have taken many jobs, and my life is structured in a lot of ways because I need to find money. Like, that's how to live. But like, I've never made choices for money. That's just not like big choices. Never.
totally.
And to me, that's like the craziest. It's like making a choice because it's like a make-believe thing. It just like to me that's like not my soul. It's just like what? Like what are you talking about? Like, but there are huge consequences to that. Um, and I think yeah, I don't know what the point of what I was saying is, but I think that like wanting to have the things that money gets you, like I still want that. It's just a very complicated thing. This
Well, of
is
course.
not a sexy way of explaining my thoughts, but yeah, anyways. And we've
Well,
talked about
totally.
that over the years. Like that's
Yeah.
been a thing that's come, yeah.
Well, that there's so much in what you're saying. It's like obviously we live in a society that is driven by money. Like you can't exist in a North American society without like procuring money. You need to live, and we all want to live somewhat comfortably. Like there's different definitions of what comfort is and what needs are. Like obviously, some people it's like I need two cars. I need like the newest flat screen TV or whatever. I need like some people need that stuff. They need that like, and I definitely have like material needs, quote unquote, material things that I covet, things I spend money on, and things I need to make money in order to achieve. Like we can't. It's just like foolish to think that you could
Mm.
escape that. But at the same time, it's like there's a few different things. Because somebody has a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean they're more valuable. Like we were talking about with Elon Musk. Like because somebody is rich doesn't mean that they're better or smarter or whatever it is. That's been their focus and they've been able to achieve it. But we shouldn't feel lesser than them because they have more of this like make believe stuff than us. Um, but then yeah, if you're making choices like I've made a lot of choices that lost me money, like not like
Mhm.
gambling, I don't mean, but it's just like I've taken jobs that like I had opportunities to do something that would make more money, but I chose something else that I would enjoy more that made me less money or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And understanding what like the value of money is to achieve a certain level of comfort and survivability, but you can make choices that achieve you other things that maybe yeah you or I or whoever values more than money, and other people might be like, oh, that's weird, like why would you want that?
Yeah.
Like you could do this job and make more money and live in like the suburbs somewhere, but it's like you're doing what you're doing and living in one of the most expensive cities in the world, but you want to be there for different reasons that are not going to get you more money. Or I don't know exactly why you continue to live in New York.
Yeah.
It's an amazing it's an amazing place. I could like come up with reasons, but it's like your specific ones are going to be different. So anyways, that was also pretty rambling, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a fantastical. I've definitely a big magical thinking human being over here for many years. And I think there's a part of all of this that's like I thought, and this is the like unrealistic side of things, that like I think I thought if I just keep following my creative spirit and sort of like abandoning an awareness of how systems work, to put it broadly, that it will still work out for me. Like I'll just ignore the rules. I'll do me, like, yay. Like I'm still smart. Like, we're still smart and hardworking. I know, just like just because you don't follow the rules doesn't mean you're not hardworking. And so, like, I think there was just this like naivety to my actions and to my choices that even when I made alternative choices, I still had the thinking that at this point, the fairy tale of like getting all the money, acclaim, whatever would happen. And I think
totally.
that's um the latter part of my 30s was being like, oh, okay. Like,
You got to play
uh,
the game.
yeah, and really seeing how, really coming to terms with multiple games, quite frankly, in a lot of different sectors and being like, fuck. Like, I think I tried to look away to preserve myself, like for as long as I could.
Yeah.
Um, and that coupled with the world, it's just that there's a lot of reality to like the next phase of all the choices I've made. I don't know if
Mhm.
that like,
Totally. But it's also just like it feels really unfair and really frustrating to be like I'm doing like I'm working hard, I'm
hmm
driven, I'm making good, interesting work. I'm a creative person. I'm pleasant and nice and
yeah,
interesting
yeah, I'm
and
not a
cool.
fuck face. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And which is that part of it is like a whole nother topic, like why that isn't valued more. But it is frustrating to like you feel like you're doing the right things, but it's they're not. They are to us the right things, like doing making something great and putting a lot of effort into it feels like it should be enough to have some sort of recognition. Like people should notice it, people should pat you on the back, people should give you money for it, whatever it is. But it's like there's so much outside of that. And then yeah, like part of it oftentimes is actually like being a good person so often is not gonna help you get somewhere, which is so fucked up. Like it's like it so often if you're willing to exploit somebody, that'll get you somewhere. But if you're not willing to like play that game of exploitation, you're gonna get screwed. You're gonna get pushed to the bottom, and it's like really hard. And I don't think necessarily we should, if that's how we feel, we should like compromise that value. I think that's one of the most important things is like being genuine and not exploiting people. But we're living in again an exploitative system, so it's really hard to achieve success in certain like I guess commodifiable ways without having that willingness to kind of like screw somebody over, which is like so harsh.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other layer of I think my idealism of and of the New York story that y- I wanted to come to New York because it's the apex of creativity, of the creativity cultural market. It's the
Mhm.
closest I could get to that. Um, and that is not what I thought. And to your point, like just like I've seen and like my experience is mostly in the film world and in academia. But I have been told on multiple occasions that like my view of humanity or how people should treat each other is like insane. That like as if we could be nice to each other, as if
I
we could be
know.
respectful.
What?
And
It's so weird though that that's like controversial, and it's especially like in the political rhetoric of the states, especially right now. But generally, U.S. politics is more so, and but it's in Canada too, all over the world. It's like the idea of like looking out for somebody else and helping other people and being like not totally self-centered. Like you don't even have to be like totally like Mother Teresa or something like that. You don't have to be completely in that vein, but even like anything other than like total focus on self-interested gain is like perceived as weird. And it's like, what the fuck? That's so weird. Obviously not with everybody, where there's a lot of people that have
yes,
similar viewpoints to us, but like the dominant political and kind of like corporate philosophy is like complete cutthroat personal drive. It's like I don't know. It's really fucked up.
yeah, yeah. That's it. I mean, we've got to go from here. We've got to keep going, but like
How did you react when those people told you that your worldview was like unrealistic or wasn't going to get you where you wanted to go or whatever? Like what did you what
I
kind of
cried.
projects were you working on and where did it go from there? What happened?
I cried.
Yeah.
I literally cried. I mean,
Yeah.
the meeting I'm thinking of was about a work. It was in a workplace I had, and I was basically told that like w my way of working, which seemed so logical, like why can we just do this? And they just looked at me like I was crazy, and I cried. We were eating Thai food, and I just cried. And I had another meeting at a film festival where I was talking to a producer and I was this was like 6, 7 years ago. And I was really confused by how people treated each other. And they were just kind of like, well, that's what it is. And then I cried, again, while eating soup, both times
Okay,
eating
a
soup,
lot of like
both times
crying.
eating soup. And then I had a
That's a good
similar,
time to do it though. It's especially with
right?
Thai spicy. You're like nobody knows what's going on. Yeah.
It's all in the soup. And then another time in academia, similar. I mean, it's at this point, and then I've just had like numerous experiences that keep repeating because I think initially I thought that they were isolated experiences. And now I've reached a point where I understand the system and I understand I like judge individual people less. I just understand that the system supports that kind of behavior.
Right.
And that's what they,
Yeah, no, that's true. But I don't know. I don't like to let people too off the hook. It's like they still get to make choices, even if you're locked into the system in certain ways. Like you don't have to buy into it wholeheartedly. Or you can have some, even if you're like, I need to achieve these goals, you can be honest about it and compassionate to the people that you're screwing over. There's like compassionate capitalism. It's like even that like just doesn't exist. So
yeah, um because accountability,
mhm.
um even just saying something like I'm gonna do this and it's not gonna be good for you and
Yeah.
this is why I'm doing it is actually not different than doing it in the other way, except for the fact that you are being open about it and being
Yeah.
honest about and
And
like being
stepping outside of yourself.
accountable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And that, I mean, just the gaslighting, it's just it's crazy. And it's like I also don't want this project or even this conversation to be like it's like this is less complaining and more like it's just important that all of these things are on the table so that when people, including myself, make choices and like think about their lives, they don't use it to like beat themselves up or internalize it.
Mhm.
It's more just like what reality is versus pretending like it's not. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah. But again, like I said before, it's hard. It's hard, and this is like a really valuable project in that way. But I'm definitely like one of the people that is not good at that. Not like I'm so often I'll just like drift into a reverie of thinking back on the past, and obviously like a lot of it is positive, but then it often I'll think about past choices of doing things or not doing things or whatever, and like bludgeon myself with them. It's really hard for me not to do that. So,
Do
but anyways.
Well, okay. So, I mean, but bludgeoning is normal. You bludgeon a little,
Yeah.
but do you like where are you at if you want to talk like where are you at with because I associate you with music. It's like a huge part of who you are. Music, also radio, because even when we met, you were making radio plays and like all forms of audio live living.
Mhm.
Um, do you still view that as a part of your world?
Yeah, to a certain extent. So it's been, yeah, very lots of variations over the last number of years. I was playing in a band until was it last summer? 2 summers ago. Um, from 2013 till whatever 2 summers, 2022, I guess that was. Is that right? 2023. We had a band called Switches, and that was like
Oh yeah.
based in Edmonton. But then we like there was a lot of like people moving around, so it was like half on the back burner, half happening. But since then I haven't had like an active project. But for so most of the time that I have not known you, I've been still involved in bands, and that was like the biggest focus. But like there's like 12 other bands in between the last like 15 years too. But the last couple of years since I moved to Toronto, which was in 2018, till last spring when I moved back here, other than the switches, which was kind of again, like I said, kind of on the back burner, kind of not, kind of happening, kind of not. And then we just did like a big final show is what would happen 2 summers ago. I haven't had a lot of projects, and then since moving back, I haven't had one. Just next weekend, I'm supposed to be playing some music with some people, and then we're planning another band coming up later. So it's still something that I feel like I like you say, it was such a big part of my life. It was like one of the main of my 20s. That was like pretty much all I wanted to do, and that continued a lot into my 30s with some distractions, let's say. But that was still like I really got a lot out of that. Part of it is like we talked about, my focus was always spending time with friends, but I'm not the best at just, or yeah, I'm not the best at just sitting around with my friends.
Yeah.
Like I really like to have like we're working on something together, and music was such an easy and successful in like quotation marks. Like
Yeah.
we could collaborate on something that felt like we were achieving something, but it wasn't like, it never felt like work or whatever, but we were actively hanging out and participating in something together, moving towards a goal or whatever. Whereas like I want to always be with my friends, but just not having something to do with them oftentimes feels kind of weird. Um, so I want to kind of rekindle that a little bit, but I haven't put in the direct effort to achieve it. Part of it is like as we have gotten older, time is different. Like people have jobs and scheduling is really different. And then
Yeah.
also space
Totally.
is really different. Like there used to be, everyone would just have, we would be renting a cheap house and there would be a basement and we could jam in it. But now
Yeah.
nobody has that scenario. So just finding a place even to physically manifest like musical expression has been more challenging. So
Yeah.
anyways, I hope to do some of that. And then radio, like, yeah, in Montreal, I was already hosting some radio shows. And then we came to Alberta and I was beekeeping on the farm for 5 years, and then we didn't want to live rurally anymore. And I was like, oh, what could I do in the city? So I went back to school to study radio more like comprehensively or whatever. And that's when I
Mhm.
started working at CBC. And then I also had radio shows on the community station here. One of them you might have really enjoyed. It was called Too Much to Dream. It was a call-in show where people would call in with their dreams and we would interpret them. Very fun.
Shut up. Can you do it again? Can you do another radio show?
I could do another radio show, but I'm not sure. I don't think I would revive that one. It was pretty fun,
Okay.
but it also was a lot of work. We wanted more people to call in, but not as many
Yo,
people
why
called
didn't you
in as
get
we
in touch
wanted.
with me?
Yeah, we should have got you to be
You
a
should
contributor every week.
Yeah.
We had a number of friends that we would convince to call in and play characters and things like that.
Oh
And then
my
obviously
God.
there was some people that called in just like real people from the community, but we
That's
wanted it.
fucking
I really
amazing.
I really wanted it to be like nonstop blinking lights and getting people on the radio and talking about dreams, but it was hard to get that. The station is just part of it is just not enough people actually listen to. It was just the campus station, so it was like maybe just not enough people are willing to put themselves out there like that. But anyway, so then I worked for CBC, moved to Toronto, was still working at CBC, um, and then when I moved back here, I still am technically on the like payroll of CBC, but I haven't picked up any shifts because I've been working this other beekeeping job, and I haven't. Doing both is too much work. I don't want to necessarily do both,
Yeah.
and I'm still not totally sure. Like I like the radio work, but it also feels like the hours are really bad, and the culture around it is kind of draining. There's a lot of people are nice, but it's like it's really stressful, really obviously like time based.
Yeah.
Everything has to be in. You're constantly like
Are you producing?
struggling to. So I was what's called the assistant producer technician is the job that I had. So it was mostly in Toronto. It's much more siloed. It's the same job position, but you're actually mostly just doing like what's called board operation, recording, cutting, and stuff like that. So it's like live shows, just running the microphones, running the digital and audio side of things. And then they would be like, oh, if you want to chase a story, you could, but there wasn't really a lot of time for it. Whereas in Edmonton, the position is more like you're supposed to be half a producer, half chasing stories, writing scripts, booking guests, and then half running the shows. And I find that very, very stressful too. Like you have to come up. That was for me one of the biggest struggles of that job is like coming up with ideas. People would come to those story meetings and they're like, "Oh, they have like 12 ideas," and I'm like, "What? I didn't like. How do you have time to think about anything? I'm just at the job. Where do you come up with this stuff?" So, anyways, that was a big struggle for sure. Was and believing in any ideas that I had. And
Yeah, that's what
so
I was gonna say. You probably just second guess your stories.
I definitely, there was a lot of second guessing, but it also was just like, how do you even generate like something that's going to be like a 5 minute segment on the radio every day, and you got to generate like seven of them. That, I don't know, it's just crazy. I just couldn't I couldn't do it. So I haven't done much radio since I've come back. I've done a few like fill-ins on the campus show, but none, no like permanent thing. So those are things that I'm like thinking about. Like I said, I just talked to somebody yesterday about like starting another band with him and the one of the people who I was in Switches with, Tamar. I think you guys have actually met Tamar.
Yeah,
I
ages
think just
ago,
on our
yeah.
virtual. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Is
So
is that Tartar?
so there's Tara and
Tara.
there's
Well, there's
and there's Tamar.
Tara and Tamar. Tam
Yeah.
Tam?
Tam Tam. Yeah, that's
Tam
it.
Tam.
Yeah. Yeah. Tam Tam. Yeah.
Tartar Tam Tam, yeah.
So they were both in Switches. And Tara still lives in Toronto, but Tamar lives here. And so we talked about starting a band together. We want to have a double drum band, both of us playing drums.
That's so sick. I mean, not like you know that you're the reason why I c can call myself a drummer
I
and
know
do
that was
call
so fun.
myself a drummer and a
Yeah.
musician. Like you were the reason why we just suddenly were in a band
I
and
know, it was
had a
so
band.
good. Yeah. And I was your greasy manager, you
Yeah.
remember?
Yeah. I just took the art my uncle gold laminated thing off my wall and packed it.
Wow.
It's everywhere I go.
Yeah, that was
That
so
was
fun.
your band manager sweat t-shirt you made, remember?
Yeah. I don't remember what it looks like, but
Yeah.
I remember the whole scenario. I was definitely obsessed with you guys. You guys were so good. Drum
Well,
lessons into a band.
I mean, that's like the core of what's so beautiful about that. I mean, that was, well, I mean, first of all, we told people we were in a band before I knew how to play an instrument, and then we were like playing shows.
Yeah.
That was just the
To
sickest.
great
That
acclaim too. People loved you
to
guys.
great acclaim. Yeah, we had fucking fans,
Yeah.
which is insane. But yeah, I mean that's just amazing. Well, I hope you make radio. I hope you do radio shows. If you need someone to validate your ideas, just honestly,
Nice.
just call me. Because my favorite podcast is called This Jungian Life, and it is three Jungian therapists. And it is sounds like a skit because their voices are it's like it sounds like a comedy show, but it isn't. It's so serious. It's so good. And the last 20 minutes of every episode, they analyze someone's
Oh,
dream.
very fun, very fun. We were very we had no knowledge of dream analysis. We had a book from like 1910 that we would sometimes consult, but most of it was just make believe. But we really enjoyed it. I thought we had some pretty good interpretations, let me tell you.
Well,
But
you
these
should
people
listen
sound
to
like they sound like they know a lot more what they're talking about.
Sure. And I mean, like, not to insult their expertise, but like, whatever. I mean, a crocodile floating around a burning boat that your mother is screaming in, like, okay,
What does that mean? Yeah.
like, I don't know. Okay. Okay. Well, can we talk about the bees?
Hmm.
Um, because I'll just make a wide judgment on your personality. I think you've always had like music in the audio space, always been anti-corporate as a fellow, always been free artist man as a human being, but you've also always been like very connected to the earth in your own way. And so like when you went back to Edmonton to be on the farm and try to live that way and like none of that is surprising and like the fact that you balance these two kinds of art making and then like working with the environment in your way is not surprising because it seems like that's just always been like important to you. Um so yeah, what is that?
Well, that's yeah, great question. What is that? That's interesting that I don't remember feeling necessarily that way back then, but that's interesting to have you say that and you have observed that. Obviously, like yeah, right. My first year living in Montreal, I went back for the summer and did work with bees. So I guess there was already, and I people have often asked me, it's like, how did you start working with bees? Why did you start working with bees? And like that first summer when I worked for the beekeeper, like I went back like after that first year of university, went back for the summer. worked for this beekeeper and then came back to Montreal in the fall. I'm like, I don't know. Like, how did I think? Like, I didn't know this guy. How did I think he was just gonna? Why did I just assume he would give me a job? And I had not like we grew up going to the farm, and I did some farm stuff, but I was by no means like a farmer. Like it just like, why did I think that was a good idea? I don't know. Like I was like, people have asked me that so many times, and I was just like, I just decided that I was gonna do it, and I did it, and it was like really, yeah, it's really weird. But anyways, going back to the farm and doing it, it felt like that was Crystal and I really were like, this is going to be our life, like living on the farm and doing farm stuff.
Yeah.
And in certain ways, it was really nice, but it was like really challenging, way more challenging than we anticipated for a lot of different reasons. Part of it, it was just like going from like hyper so like we were just talking about, like
Hyper
my main focus
social.
was just like spending time with my friends, living with a group of people, constantly having people coming and going, doing things with people, to living on the farm, which is 2 hours north of Edmonton. There's no community there at all. It's like literally just like a farm surrounded by other farmers, but the
Yeah.
way like Canadian and most of the American farming is, it's just like big pieces of property with nobody. It's not like a village you're living in, or you're
Yeah.
not getting help from your neighbors per se or whatever. So it felt really isolating. And then everyone we interacted with was also like, yeah, they did not share our experiences. Obviously, they had not lived like a carefree,
Yeah.
like hippie bohemian life
Yeah, yeah.
previously. Like they'd just been living in that area. So just like the social side of it was really tough. Having to work a lot was hard, like constant, just like constant toil. And I felt really obliged to just always be working basically. And that was really
Yeah.
a strain on Crystal in particular, who needs a lot of time, more like thinking space and creative space. She like, obviously I've been involved with art, but she like is an artist, and so she needed that freedom, and so that was really tough on her. And plus, it's like my family's farm. It wasn't. We thought like it was essentially like nobody was using it, nobody's going out there, but it's like it's not. That wasn't the case. Especially when we went back. My parents were very excited, so they were there a lot. It was almost like living with my parents. And then my cousin has like a
Yay.
half stake, yeah, has a half stake in the farm with his family. So him and his family was there all the time too, not in the same house, but like just in the
Yeah.
yard. They had trailers. It was just like a lot of negotiation. We couldn't just like make our own choices in terms of like renovations or choices of what we were growing or what we were doing and building and all this stuff. It was just like, yeah, really tough in a lot of ways. It was had beautiful sides of it, and we did really like it, but we very quickly realized that it was not a good fit for us, which was pretty disheartening ultimately. Like
Yeah.
it was pretty hard to like come to that realization that we had like picked up stakes completely, changed our entire lives like for this thing, and then we were like, okay, this is not going to work. We're going to have to totally pivot and change our plans. So we moved back to the city, and that's like I said, I got into radio. But then when I
Yeah.
was working in Toronto at CBC in Toronto, I found out that they had hives on the roof of the building. I was like, oh, that's
Oh.
crazy. Like beehives in the city, what's going on there? And they're like, oh, there's this company that does it. And I was like, oh, whoa, I should like look up this company. So I applied for this company, and then I ended up getting a job, which, as I was talking about before, it's like it paid me less than I was making at CBC, less benefits. Financially, it was like much harder work for less gain than I was at CBC. But I was also a bit frustrated with like having applied for a bunch of positions at CBC, not getting them, and all this stuff. So it was like an interesting like pivot point at that point. But it felt really like serendipitous. I was like, oh, like I liked working with the bees. The beekeeping side of it was not really one of the problems of living at the farm. Like I did really enjoy the
Yeah.
bee work. It was just like kind of all everything else surrounding it wasn't lining up. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I can live in a city and take
And
care of bees.
have
That's
your
pretty cool.
bees.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm still working for that same company. They're called Alveol. They're actually a Montreal-based company. But now, like, so I moved back to Edmonton. They said I couldn't get a job in Edmonton, but then it turned out that I could. I'm like the only beekeeper here. But the company itself, just like we've been talking about, they started out as this like three friends in Montreal that kind of had this like hippie vision, turned it into a kind of corporate entity that was fairly successful. But
Yeah.
then it turned out it wasn't as successful as they thought, kind of thing, in terms of
Yeah.
like they expanded really far. They kind of spread themselves too thin. They had this like vision for it, and they weren't doing the financials very well. And so then they
Yeah.
had to like bring in advisors and funding and all that stuff, and it's really pivoted the business into a much more like classic corporate capitalist venture, which is not the moves that it's making now makes it less appealing to work for them. I'm
Yeah.
obviously still in it for this season, but it is a bit disappointing to. I'm still doing work that I enjoy mostly, but I'm not sure if it's going to be like continuing after this year, basically, because the company
Yeah.
is pissing me off.
How fascinating. So I
Yeah,
wonder what will happen with the bees and the radio and
yeah. Who
music.
knows? Yeah, who knows?
That's crazy. I did not realize. So did you truly went from like inside CBC to working like on top of CBC?
So ultimately, like I thought I could, I kind of thought that would happen, but everyone, the way
Yeah.
it works is there's a bunch of clients. The way the company is organized, it's like there are clients and they buy the service from this company and they get assigned a beekeeper, and that beekeeper puts the bees on their property, takes care of them. They
Yeah.
get workshops. The beekeepers have to facilitate these workshops, and then the client gets the honey at the end of the year. So in Toronto, there's a lot of clients. There's like 350 clients or whatever. So they were split up between a number of beekeepers, and I didn't get CBC was not one of my clients, as it turned
Okay.
out. Like they were just like divided in a certain way. And my
Okay.
job, especially for the first couple of years, there was specific and slightly different than kind of everyone else's because I had beekeeping experience and basically nobody else did. So there was like, anyways, we don't have to get too far in the weeds there. But they weren't my client, but it was like that. It was
Yeah.
kind of like I went from inside CBC to working on buildings just like CBC, taking care of bees, which was pretty interesting.
Something that I do think a lot about, and again, like time is different now. Friends are different now, and like community is different now. And I think I've struggled with community like for a long time. Ever since community was so obvious in my life in my 20s, it's just stopped being obvious. And
Hmm.
especially thinking about my community in New York because I've basically been here since I left you back and forth many times, but like here a lot. Um, my community has been like founded on different things. I think I had a community here that was very opportunistic for like a portion of my life. My
Mm.
earlier years in New York, that was like trying to I just ended up, I was like trying to be successful and I was trying. So my community was founded on like less just everyone's a homie vibes. And it was like, what can we get from each other, which is a very New
Right.
York thing,
Hmm.
our like big city thing. And like just a lot of sadness. Obviously, COVID happened, but a lot of sadness around like, will I ever have a community of people like professionally and not just that I feel like supported by and just comfortable with and can do things with and like babies are welcome like all the and like will is that ever possible? And I think that I've been like prioritizing that a little bit more and being like more conscious about people and that kind of thing over the past 3 years of being back here, 3 or 4 years. And I feel that now, like for the first time, turning 40, honestly, one of the things that I was the most grateful for was my friends. And I was like, oh, I think actually I have a community now. And that is a I didn't like I don't never expected to my life to be what it is now, but like I think that's something that I am like regrowing, like the roots are coming back. So I feel cool about that. But how does it feel for you being in Edmonton now and like do you think about that?
Oh yeah, totally. And in Toronto, it was interesting. Like I didn't love Toronto as a city, but there was like a lot of like important people in my life that were there that felt really like grounding and really did feel really community. And then like adding on this like beekeeping like group
True.
also really felt like growing in a way that I did not expect and anticipate. And then coming back to Edmonton, yeah, there's a lot of people that I've known, like my one of my friends that I've known literally since we were babies. Like we're still close friends. So coming back to something that's like so familiar, but compared to Toronto, where everyone it was a bit more close to that Montreal style where most of the people who were living in Toronto didn't have like a clear focus and a clear family
Mm,
structure and corp and like career structure in the same way. Some of them did, but generally not. And so there was more of that just kind of like listless, like hanging out or contributing to projects or working on stuff or whatever it was. Not like nowhere near like the kind of like freedom of our 20s, but it was
hmm.
not so dissimilar. There was like shades of that. And in Edmonton, I have a lot of really close friends here, but everyone is more kind of locked into their lifestyles and their families and their careers and all that stuff. It doesn't feel quite as like I feel very safe with everyone here, like very comfortable and very connected, but not as it's the frequency of socializing. I find like um disappointing, I guess. Disappointing is not the
Yeah.
right word. It just feels like a bit like I would like to see people more, but part of it is like the place we're living in is not that great for hosting. Other people have kids and like that doesn't always make sense to like do stuff with kids, and most of us are not playing music in the same way. Going to shows is not as appealing
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're old and tired. It's just like
Yeah.
I that part of what I have been thinking about recently is just like coming up with projects to work on so I can have that kind of like structured hangs that I definitely really need, but I'm not totally getting right now.
Yeah. Like so much of my creative confidence and joy was made in our time together. And like so much of okay, do you remember the game? And I think this has got to be you. Do you remember we would go to like a corner of a street? We go to the game was you go to the corner of the street and you roll a dice, and then the
Oh yeah.
dice decides what
Which
we do
direction you go?
next.
Yeah. I love that game. My favorite
That's the
game.
best game ever. Like that's like what being and that's being super present. That's like what being like that's where my joy comes from. And that's
Yeah, being
also
open
like
to possibility.
yeah, it's such an essential component of trusting yourself in any kind of art that you make. And just like being in the world. So I just think that you need to keep coming up with all kinds of stuff and doing it and putting it out there. Like for
Yeah.
me.
I appreciate that. And that's really nice of you to say all of that and to remember that stuff. It's like I definitely like yeah, I loved those times and like I said, you are definitely a shining star of those Montreal days. You were like such a how do I even say it? Like you were so down for everything, like so enthusiastic, so excited, so invested in like all the schemes that we would be involved with. So fun to be around always. Like obviously everyone's going to struggle and have moods or whatever, but
That's
I don't ever remember that with you. Honestly. Like I don't remember any points of conflict. Like maybe there were and I don't remember them. Like maybe there was things happening. And I shouldn't say that I never saw you having conflicts in your life.
mm,
I definitely did see that, you
mm,
experiencing that, but I didn't feel like you ever brought it into interactions with people, or at least with me, that wasn't like at fault in that or whatever. It wasn't involved. It just felt like, yeah, you're just like visiting you in Toronto, in New
in New
York was
York.
like so exciting. Like just like could not be more fun than getting the chance to like go and sleep on Vanessa's floor. Like, wow, that's great.
Best Halloweens of our life,
Yeah.
of my life, truly. The Blue Man, your Blue Man? Do you
Yeah,
remember that?
definitely. Oh, I
Like
remember. I definitely remember.
phenomenal. But also I think
Ceiling fan. You were a ceiling fan.
ceiling fan. Oh my, no, I wasn't the ceiling fan. I was the
Oh, ceiling,
ceiling
ceiling. Right, right.
best costume. Oh,
Even
that is
better.
my best
Yeah.
costume ever. Do you want to say have that? Do you want to say anything?
I don't necessarily have anything to add. I think it's interesting what we talked about. I didn't know what we would talk about, and it's interesting the direction we went. I'm curious, though, honestly, about like your life over the last 15 years, but maybe you want to talk about that after the fact. But like, I would like you to paint me the picture of where you've been, what you've been doing, who you're in touch with, and what and all that stuff. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. We haven't been in touch at all, so I'm definitely curious to just have like just catch me up.
Talk
Like,
about.
what's going on?
Okay, I'm gonna end this now, and then we're gonna really catch up. But thank you
Thank you.
And
This is really a bright light in the wintry day that I have here. We just got like a dump of snow and
really?
minus 20 overnight last night. So
Oh wow,
yeah.
it's balmy here.
Yeah. It was balmy here. It was spring 2 weeks ago, but winter has returned just in time. I'm supposed to be opening the beehives next week, but that's not going to happen. It's too cold. So, but that's okay. But that's all to say that this was really great. I really, yeah, thanks for asking. I felt really flattered to have been asked to be like remembered is nice. Like to be still thought of in some way as like a friend after all this time. I definitely feel that way about you, and I think about like those times a lot. But it's like it's hard to know what other people like. Was that just a blip for somebody that they don't care about you or anything? So it was really nice to get the email.
That's crazy. You would think that I would think that you're a blip.
Well, I guess not, but it's
10
like
years. That was like 10 years. I don't think there's, I mean, just to say, I don't think that it would be appropriate. The amount of time that we spent in each other's houses, like
right.
that's insane. Like
Totally.
you can't forget
I
that.
feel like locked in forever, but it's just like I don't want to I never like to assume that everyone feels the same way that I do, I guess. But that's like yeah, I guess that's like a self-respect and self-esteem type of thing. But anyways,
That's your
that's all
mental
to,
problems.
that's my mental problems. Yeah, exactly. But that's all to say that it was really nice to talk to you. I'm really glad that you
Yeah.
reached out. It's really sweet.
Okay, I'm hanging up now. No, I'm not hanging up. Hold on, I'm gonna end the recording now.